Your Royal Highness, Crown Prince Haakon, Minister of Education and Research Torbjørn Isaksen, Laureates, Baroness O'Neill, Professor Vellesen Løken, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this year's award ceremony to celebrate the Nils Klim Prize and the Holberg Prize. Obviously, today is, above all, the celebration of this year's prize winners. But we also celebrate the academic disciplines of the arts and humanities, social sciences, law and theology. And when the Norwegian Parliament, Stortinget, established the Ludvig Holberg Memorial Fund in 2003, the goal was to elevate the status of these academic disciplines. Since then, it has been the privilege of our university, the University of Bergen, to be associated with these highly recognized and esteemed prizes. After the first award was given in 2004, there have been a great many outstanding laureates that have been selected by the committee. And this year's laureates are absolutely no exception to that. The awards and the laureates have sparked national as well as international attention, which in turn has led to increased awareness of the importance of these fields. This year's Holberg laureate, Holberg's brave, scientific and deeply committed work has shed light on some of the most pressing intellectual and practical challenges of our time. Her early research changed our understanding of Kant. Her books resonate widely, and they have created a renewed interest in Kant's work. But above all, her statements about the requirements of the public sense have introduced a new level of precision in the debate, which has engaged some of the most influential intellectuals of our time. The research conducted by this year's winner of the Nils Klim Prize is characterized by the rigorous and thorough use of mathematical models, with a special emphasis on decisive causal factors. Her research addresses pressing issues, more specifically how state policies influences individuals' behaviors. At the moment, the Norwegian Parliament is discussing a white paper on the humanities. And in the same way that a prize like the Holberg Prize will raise the status of these disciplines, I believe that a white paper will raise the awareness of the importance of these academic disciplines. In an era of highly complex challenges, we need these academic disciplines, and we need them to play a greater, more prominent role. And we need the knowledge and insight that they bring about. There are close ties between Bergen and Ludvig Holberg. The Bergen School of Latin, Schola Bergensis, was founded in 1153. This in turn became Bergen Katedralskole, Bergen Cathedral School, where Holberg started his academic and literary career. Earlier today, some of us has visited the Bergen Cathedral School to award the Holberg School project and the prizes associated with that. And this, of course, to promote the same scholarly disciplines, which we celebrate here today, but amongst the younger generation. The Nils Klim Prize, named after the character of Holberg's fantasy novel, Nils Klim's Underground Travels, is awarded to a young Nordic scholar. Together, the Nils Klim Prize and the award ceremony at the Bergen Cathedral School earlier today point to the future and the importance of these academic disciplines also for generations to come. Well, Your Royal Highness, with these words, I again welcome you to the award ceremony, celebrating this year's laureates of the Nils Klim Prize and the Holberg Prize. Thank you.
Your Royal Highness, Minister, laureates, guests and friends from Norway and abroad. The Holberg Prize was established by the Norwegian Parliament in 2003. The prize is administered by the University of Bergen on behalf of the Norwegian Ministry of Education and Research. The university has appointed a board for the Holberg Prize. Every year, 2 prizes are awarded within the academic fields of the arts and humanities, social science, law, and theology, the main Holberg Prize and the Nils Klim Prize. The prizes are intended to raise the status of the fields covered by the prizes and to increase society's awareness of the importance of research in these fields. The prizes are awarded by the board on behalf of the University of Bergen and on the recommendation of academic committees which consist of outstanding scholars in the relevant academic fields. The Nils Klim Prize is awarded annually to a young Nordic researcher. The laureate must be under 35 years of age. The prize is awarded to researchers who have made outstanding contributions either within one discipline or through interdisciplinary work. The independence and innovativeness of the researcher's work is particularly important. It is also considered whether the research contribution is especially outstanding or promising in light of the researcher's age, the nature of the research project, and the research traditions in the researcher's academic field. The prize is worth 300,000 Norwegian kroner, approximately 32,000 euros. On behalf of the University of Bergen and on the recommendation of the Nils Klim Academic Committee, the board of the Holberg Prize has decided that this year's Nils Klim Prize goes to Professor Katrine Vellesen Løken. Katrine Vellesen Løken, born 1983, is a Norwegian scholar within the field of economics. She was educated at the University of Bergen, where she completed her doctoral studies in 2010. Since then, she has been affiliated with the University of Bergen as a postdoctoral fellow, as an associate professor, and since 2015 as a professor of economics. She has also been a research fellow at the Institute for the Study of Labor in Bonn, a researcher at Statistics Norway, and a visiting scholar at the University of California, San Diego. The Nils Klim Academic Committee points out that Katrine Vellesen Løken's research merits are impressive. Her topics cover key issues of the Nordic welfare states approached from a sophisticated economic perspective. She has treated topics ranging from family policy studies to health sciences and criminology. The hallmark of her contribution is her stringent and meticulous application of advanced mathematical models with a particular emphasis on isolating the decisive causal factor. Together with a number of co-authors, she has broached issues that might change the research focus in her field of economics. Another aspect of her contribution is the ability to pursue her chosen research topic, the impact of state policies on individual behavior, across a number of disciplinary boundaries. Her research has evident relevance for policymaking, even beyond the Nordic context. Based on her research results, she has taken active part in the public debate. Katrine Vellesen Løken's list of publications surpasses any expectations of a person her age. She has consistently published in the leading international journals of her discipline, such as American Economic Review, American Economic Journal, Journal of Political Economy, and Review of Economics and Statistics. Bringing issues of welfare state family policies into the center of attention in the field of economics is no small achievement. Katrine Vellesen Løken is a most worthy Nils Klim laureate, and she will serve as an inspiration to other young researchers in the social sciences. I ask the Minister of Education and Research, Torbjørn Isaksen, and Professor Katrine Vellesen Løken to join me on the podium, where the Minister will present this year's Nils Klim Prize.
Your Royal Highness Crown Prince Haakon, Minister, the Holberg Board, the Nils Klim Committee, colleagues, family, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to stand here today and receive the 2017 Nils Klim Prize for my research. I feel humbled to follow in the footsteps of the excellent Nordic scholars who have previously been awarded this prize, covering research across the arts and humanities, social sciences, law, and theology. Ludvig Holberg, whom we are celebrating today, was a writer, philosopher, theologian, and historian. A lot of his discussion and plays are important also today. In the fantasy novel by Ludvig Holberg, The Nils Klim's Underground Travels, Nils Klim travels to the fantasy country of Kokleko. He sees here a society where the relationships of the genders are turned upside down. The men do the cleaning, the weaving, and the childcare, while the women are the thinkers and they make the important decisions. This society is very different from what we observe in most countries around the world today. Here, typically, the males are the dominant gender. However, in many domains, the Nordic countries have been frontrunners in demonstrating better gender balances to the rest of the world. Both where family policies have been very important programs for laying the foundations for these improved gender balances. In one of my articles, co-authored with my colleagues Gordon Dahl and Magne Mogstad, we showed that the introduction of the father's parental leave quota in Norway changed the social norm that only the mothers should take care of the child within the first year of their life. We show that more than 50% of the increase in paternity leave take-up in Norway from 1993 to 2015 can be attributed to spillovers between brothers and male colleagues in firms. Prior to the reform, less than 3% of any fathers, took any leave at all. Today, more than 90% of fathers take a significant share of parental leave in Norway. Ludvig Holberg was also interested in law. More recently, I've changed the focus of my research to law and economics in order to study the prison population and their networks of victims, family, co-offenders, and neighbors. In the coming year, my colleagues and I plan to change the way we conduct empirical research on the causes and consequences of crime by taking into account this social context. We think this will give us a better understanding of the total costs of crime, how to better direct funds for crime prevention, and how to improve rehabilitation programs in prison. One key preliminary finding is that the Nordic prisons and their rehabilitation programs can significantly reduce later criminality through increased participation in the labor market. Again, the Nordic countries serve as inspiration for other countries on how to form and direct resources to the penal system. I could not have received this prize had it not been for my fantastic co-authors. We have shared the hard work's ups and downs, and the happiness when finally nailing a project. I especially want to thank my PhD supervisor, Kjell Erik Lommerud, who has been an important mentor and friend. Without the support of colleagues, friends, and family, I would not have been here today. On this note, I thank the Nils Klim Committee for recognizing the importance of my research. Thank you.
Your Royal Highness, Minister, laureates, guests and friends. The Holberg Prize is awarded annually to scholars who have made outstanding contributions to research in the arts and humanities, social science, law or theology, either within one discipline or through interdisciplinary work. The prize winner must have had a decisive influence on international research. The prize is worth 4.5 million Norwegian kroner, approximately 480,000 euros. On behalf of the University of Bergen and on the recommendation of the Holberg Academic Committee, the board of the Holberg Prize has decided that this year's Holberg Prize goes to Professor Onora O'Neill. Onora O'Neill, born in Northern Ireland 1941, is a philosopher and an honorary emeritus professor of philosophy at the University of Cambridge. O'Neill is educated at Oxford University and Harvard University, where she completed her PhD in 1969. During the 1970s, she taught at Barnard College, Columbia University, and in 1977, she joined the University of Essex, where she became a professor of philosophy. Between 1992 and 2006, she was the principal of Newnham College at the University of Cambridge. She has been the Spinoza Chair of Philosophy at the University of Amsterdam, and she is a distinguished senior fellow of the School of Advanced Study at the University of London. O'Neill is the founding president of the British Philosophical Association and the former president of the British Academy. She is a member of several academies in different countries. She has been awarded honorary doctorates at a number of universities, and she has received many orders of honor. In 1999, she was created a life peer as Baroness O'Neill of Bengarve and became an independent member of the House of Lords in the Parliament of the United Kingdom. The Holberg Prize Academic Committee points out that Onora O'Neill is one of the most distinguished and influential philosophers of her generation. Her bold, scholarly, and deeply humane work has shed light on some of the most pressing intellectual and practical challenges of our time. Her early work transformed our understanding of Kant. Acting on Principle 1975 gave a novel account of the relationship between morality and rationality in Kant. In Constructions of Reason, 1989, O'Neill argued, much against received wisdom, that Kant saw reasoning as requiring that we make it possible for others to understand what we say and to grasp what we do. In an era where the quality of Kant's scholarship has been unusually high, her preeminence signifies an achievement of the highest order. But her scholarship did not just transform our understanding of Kant. Her books added an unprecedented vibrancy to the resurgence of interest in his work. In particular, her thinking about the requirements of public reason added great subtlety to a debate that has engaged some of the most powerful intellects of our time. Her achievement became even more compelling when she turned her philosophical and moral acuity to some of the most pressing questions of our time. She demonstrated how to do philosophy in a way that measured up to the complex moral demands of the world. In books such as Faces of Hunger, 1986, and The Bounds of Justice, 2000, she changed our understanding of the nature of our obligations in an unequal world. While rigorously arguing for a world of porous boundaries and a more dispersed and even distribution of power, O'Neill showed how doctrines of rights and notions of obligation require us to pay attention not just to the needs of strangers, but to the structural conditions of oppression that mark the lives of so many people in the world. O'Neill has had an enormous impact on the wider public sphere, both in the UK and beyond. She has used her scholarly expertise and acumen to change the terms of public discourse, making philosophical issues relevant to a much wider community. This has involved generously taking on demanding institutional roles. For example, her work in the Nuffield Foundation, in the Nuffield Council on Bioethics, and the Equality and Human Rights Commission. She is a dedicated public servant, devoting great energy to the social and cultural good without seeking the limelight. Increasingly, however, she has played a prominent part both in the UK Parliament, in the House of Lords as a non-aligned crossbencher, and in wider public debate on subjects ranging from human rights and press freedom to end-of-life care. Her 2002 BBC's Wreath lectures on the subject of trust argued that we should think more sceptically about rules and regulations that try to enforce accountability and transparency. These lectures were controversial, but also prompted a lively international discussion at an unusually high level. Here we can see O'Neill exemplifying the very philosophical principles about which she writes. O'Neill's work has the extraordinary ability not just to engage with complex issues of global justice. It also illuminates some of the most intimate questions of morality and public policy. Her work on bioethics in both theoretical and practical contexts contains some of the most penetrating discussions of autonomy, trust, and informed consent. But it is her ability to blend questions of morality with an account of psychological plausibility and institutional legitimacy that makes her a powerful guide to the most profound ethical questions of our time. Her philosophical work is rigorous yet gracious in its articulation and profoundly moved by a deep and abiding concern for humanity. O'Neill is a true citizen philosopher. I would like to ask His Royal Highness Crown Prince Haakon and Baroness Onora O'Neill to join me on the podium where the Crown Prince will present this year's Holberg Prize.
Your Royal Highness, Crown Prince Haakon, Minister, esteemed members of the Holberg Committee and Board, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, both those who are here and those who cannot be here, it is a very great honor to be awarded the Holberg Prize and a very large surprise. I thank the committee for their hard work and the Norwegian people for their great generosity and their recognition most deeply. It is also a great pleasure to come to Bergen for the first time and to see this beautiful city and spectacular coastline. I too come from a rainy and spectacular part of our continent, the Antrim Hills in Northern Ireland, although I do not think that our rainfall is quite so great or our scenery quite so grand. I had, however, grown up with a sense of sadness about the Atlantic coast of Norway. My father's first cousin and close contemporary Captain Brian O'Neill of the Irish Guards was killed on the 14th of May 1940 when the ill-fated British Expeditionary Force was being evacuated. He was on the requisitioned Polish ship, the Torbjørn, which was bombed by the Luftwaffe off the Lofoten Islands, and while most of those on board were rescued, he was not. I did not want today to pass without publicly remembering this sadness, but I realize that I will now also have happy memories of this coast. So enough of old, unhappy, far-off things and battles long ago. Like anyone who has pursued the life of the mind for a long time, I've sometimes been tempted to imagine that there has been a very clear trajectory to my explorations. But in truth, a lot has been less than planned, and I have wandered into many blind alleys. I certainly never planned to spend long years working on the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, although I am glad that I persisted. When I began studying philosophy in Oxford, my tutors, Elizabeth Anscombe, who had studied with Wittgenstein, and Philippa Foot, whose writing on virtue was broadly Aristotelian, were united in thinking that Kant's views on reason and morality were both philosophically implausible and morally corrupt. Those claims have a very long history. Hegel was the first to accuse Kant of reducing morality to empty formalism, while of course supposedly also displaying a mindless rigorism by insisting that ethics take no account of varying circumstances. Although these accusations are incompatible, their combination is perennially popular to this day. Now, Kant indeed saw duty as fundamental to morality, both in the public sphere and in private life. But in this he was not original. Duty, both public and private, had been the cornerstone of European ethics at least since the time of Cicero. Its preeminence was, of course, queried in the late 19th century by Friedrich Nietzsche, by G.E. Moore, but it fell into serious disrepute when an exaggerated emphasis on patriotic duty, and specifically on killing and dying for king and country, promoted a very grim version of the ethics of duty during the dark years of 1914 to 1918. The ethics of duty, however, then fell into wider philosophical disrepute when the logical positivists of the 1930s claimed that all of morality and metaphysics, theology and aesthetics, everything indeed that the Holberg Prize exists to celebrate, not merely lacked justification, but were literally meaningless. Their arguments, as we now know, were slender, but the damage was very extensive, and it became conventional to identify ethics with the preferences that individuals happen to have, and to cover up this devaluation of values by calling these preferences values. This way of thinking and talking is now very well entrenched, and it fits perfectly with the libertarian versions of liberalism that have gained such currency. However, the further disaster of Nazism and a Second World War convinced many that at least the ethics of the public domain must be rescued from the dustbin of history. And since the late 1940s, as we all know, appeals to human rights have been a favored way of restoring at least an account of justice, that is, of the ethics of the public domain. But a focus on rights is inevitably evasive about the ethics of the rest of life, and indeed about the ethics of the public domain, because which is changed when we prioritize rights over duties. Once rights are taken as fundamental, the classical ethical question, what ought we do, is replaced with the less lovely question, what ought others do for us? And the ethics of private life, where duties that lack counterpart rights matter, is readily ignored or reduced to the domain of individual choice. Now, you may think that in this situation, the ancient war cry, back to Kant, might have a point, but it might also have a rub. Kant supports his account of ethics with reasons, and he audaciously claims to support reason itself with a critique of reason. Many have thought this venture doomed, for how could anyone justify reason itself? If the supposed justification is based on reason, it will be circular, so fail to justify. If it does not appeal to reason, it will even more obviously fail to justify. Gradually, as I tussled with Kant's work on this topic, I came to see that behind his ponderous rhetoric about reason, there is in fact a more modest claim. Reasoning is an activity in which we offer considerations to others and are offered considerations by others. Reasoning must therefore respect the basic disciplines for successful communication with others. We can at least say this much about reasoning. If we want to give others reasons to believe something, we must offer them considerations that they could follow in thought. And if we want to give them reasons for acting, we must offer them proposals that they could adopt as principles for action. Kant, in short, rejects Descartes' view, which has been so influential in European life and thought, that reason is simply complete and entire in each one of us. When we propose reasons, we must meet the necessary conditions for the possibility of sharing claims about what to believe and claims about what to do. And when we propose reasons that are to be relevant to everyone, such as the reasons for belief that scientific inquiry seeks, or the reasons for action that ethics seeks, we must offer considerations that could in principle be followed in thought or adopted for action by all others. Now, this line of thought may seem to offer limited comfort because it is so weak. Surely, countless beliefs could be accepted by all others, and countless principles of action could be adopted by all others. How can such a minimal principle justify any ethical principles? Won't it also support and seemingly therefore justify lots of false beliefs and lots of ethically dubious principles? Does Kant's account of reason do more than get us out of the frying pan and leaving us to roast in the fire? However, the demand that those ethical principles be for everybody requires us to reject principles that cannot be principles for all. Kant's account of reasoning, the infamous categorical imperative, is, I think, in the end, no more than a demand to set aside principles that cannot be principles for everyone. For example, we cannot even imagine a world in which principles of killing or violence, or coercion or manipulation, or deception or dishonesty are universally adopted. That is because their universal adoption is incoherent, since those who became victims of such action could not themselves adopt those very principles of action, or indeed other principles. The categorical imperative, in short, is not empty, since it demands the rejection of principles that cannot be principles for all. Kant derives an account of duty, in short, from the necessary conditions of the possibility of communicating with the world at large. He called this approach to justification an account of public reason, and this now once again resonant phrase has been taken up by distinguished late 20th century political philosophers, including John Rawls, my supervisor at Harvard, Jürgen Habermas, and Amartya Sen. However, Kant's account of public reason is more austere than contemporary accounts, which identify public reason with communication under specified conditions. For Rawls, in his late writings, public reason is exemplified in communication among fellow citizens within bounded liberal democratic polities. For Habermas, it is achieved by communication aimed at agreement in which all are free to participate. For Sen, it is communication aimed at agreement in communication that meets specified conditions and the agreement may secure. So each in a way sees reasoning as preeminently aiming at agreement, and in the main as agreement achieved by democratic process. Kant was more circumspect. He did not assume that reasoning had to lead to agreement, but only that it is lacking where intended audiences cannot even follow what the other party claims or intends. A corollary of this minimalist Kantian view of reason is that we have no grounds for thinking that only the ethical standards of the public domain, for example, claims about human rights or claims about theories of justice, are justifiable, and for thinking that the ethics of the rest of life simply reflects individual choices and preferences. A wider range of traditional duties, perhaps including duties of honesty and fidelity, of clemency and beneficence, may also be justifiable. It may be that we can still find arguments for the older and more generous view of ethics that John Locke saw as linking the great maxims of justice and of charity. A revised form of Kantian ethics may also be distinctively relevant to some of the deepest and newest challenges that we face today in our thinking about ethical standards for communication. No aspect of our lives has changed more during the past century than practices of communication. In their day, earlier revolutions in technologies for communication gave rise to deep ethical controversy and upheavals, and so do those of our day. The first confrontation between ethical claims and communications technologies, of which we know, is discussed in Plato's comments on Socrates' mistrust of the written word in his dialogue Phaedrus. Plato, who of course wrote, which Socrates did not, Plato depicts Socrates as criticizing the new world of writing in which words could be distanced from their authors and sent, as he expresses it, fatherless into the world, with nobody to stand up for them or to intervene to ward off distortion, misinterpretation, or misunderstanding. A second wave of dispute and controversy arose when printing enabled communication that could not merely distance words from their authors, thereby bridging time and distance and separating originator from recipient, but also expanded audiences and multiplied possibilities for exercising and for challenging power and control. The titanic debates of the early modern period took the form of battles about censorship and toleration, about freedom of speech and of the press. But the liberal resolution reached about the printed word has been placed under severe pressure in the 20th century. The successive emergence of telephony, radio, film, television, the internet, social media, and latterly, of course, of algorithms for the automated selection and dissemination and recirculation of content have transformed communication and the exercise of power. We are moving rapidly away from the early days of the internet, in which starry-eyed cyber romantics imagined that the solutions of the early modern period that sought to limit control of the written word by church and state would provide an ethically sound model for the new forms of communication. That liberal, latterly very often libertarian vision is being betrayed by the very openness that the early modern period could celebrate and aim for. We now need to consider how freedom of expression might best be configured now that communications technologies offer spectacular advantages to many who have reasons to hide themselves in cloaks of anonymity. How are we, in our generation, to address the harms caused by online bullies and blackmailers, extremists and pedophiles, inventors of fake news and terrorist plots, who use a cloak of anonymity to harm, to intimidate, to deceive? How are we to deal with the echo chambers filled with corrosive content and abuse, with the algorithms that can ensure that we read only the sort of content that we like, and that reduce the possibility of encountering material that checks and challenges what we already believe? How are personal and democratic life to be protected in our new situation from those whose weapon is ostensibly merely the dissemination of content? It's tempting to think that because we managed the transitions to writing and to printing, we already have tried and tested ways of dealing with the new challenges. But do we? Here, perhaps philosophers and others should fear to tread, but I also think perhaps we should be bold. Your Highness, Minister, distinguished guests, I thank you for this very great honor, for your being here this evening, and for listening.